Some of you may be surprised to hear this, but I actually had a pretty good reading month in March. Hi friends, my name is Jess and welcome back to Books Past Bedtime. Today I'm bringing you my March wrap up and I'm going to talk about all of the books that I read in March. But first, as always, let's start off with a few stats. So in March I did read a total of 12 books. I would have liked to have read a couple more because most of these books I honestly read in the first 2.5 weeks of March, and I kind of fell into a reading slump in the second half of the month. But overall I'm pretty happy with how many books I read. I definitely read more than I read in February, and I read the same amount that I read in January, so I am counting it as a win. My total page count for the month was 4,136 pages. I listened to almost exactly 47 hours worth of audio. All of this was on 2x speed. So like roughly 23 actual hours, almost a full day of listening to audiobooks. As usual, love audiobooks, obsessed with them. My average rating this month was a 4.33, which I think is the highest average rating ever. Like, I usually am so critical about my books, but the books that I did read this month I really enjoyed, which is why I said that I had a great reading month. I feel like my average rating is usually like skewed to the lower 3s, so to have it up in the 4s is awesome. I was very happy with all of the books that I read this month, and I also have some little additional stats down here. I did acquire one book this month, and that was my book of the month book. I got the final revival of Opal and Nev, but I have not read it yet. Surprise, surprise. I also actually checked out 10 books from the library this month. I don't track the books that I get from Libby because those just go in and out, but I am going to be tracking any physical books I check out from the library, and I did make my first library run this month, so that is why that stat is there. Hopefully I will get to some of those this coming month in April, but I kind of was just trying to get out of a reading slump and hoping that would inspire me, so we'll see. I also read 6 books this month that could be considered own voices in some capacity, so that is pretty good. I also meant to figure out how many of the books that I read from my TBR. I'm going to put those stats on the screen now, but I don't know them off the top of my head right this second. So moving on to the genres that I read this month, I did read 2 contemporary books, and I also read 2 fantasy books. I read 1 magical realism. I actually read 2 nonfiction this month, which is good because one of my goals this year is to read 12 nonfiction books, so 1 a month, and I don't think I read 1 in February, so I was kind of making up for that this month, so I have now read 3 for the year, so I'm on track with that goal. And then I read 3 romance books and 2 thrillers. Moving on to the format of my books, I read 5 audiobooks, 2 ebooks, and 5 physical books. Some of these were crossovers, honestly. Some of the physical books I listened to half on audio and read half physically, and then I think one of the ebooks I also had the audiobook for, so I kind of switched back and forth. It's hard to track that because for me those aren't like simple categories to stick books in, but for the most part that is how I consumed the majority of the book. Moving on to audience, I read 4 adult books, 2 new adult books, and 6 YA books. Definitely a little YA heavy this month, but as I mentioned, I was feeling a little slumpy. Those were easier to pick up and get through, so that is why there is a higher percentage of those represented this month. As far as author identity goes, I read 2 books from authors who use he, him pronouns. I read 1 book by an intersex author. I read 8 books by authors who use she, her pronouns, and 1 book from an author who uses they, them pronouns. As far as the race of the authors that I read this month, 4 were black and 8 were white. Author status is a little bit different than usual. I actually read 7 books from authors that I had read before and 5 books from authors that were new to me. I feel like usually I'm reading more new to me authors, so it was kind of cool to see myself pick up a lot of repeat authors, and these are books that I really enjoyed this month, so that shows me I'm finding more authors that I enjoy, so that's cool. Breaking down my rating a little bit more, as I mentioned earlier, my average rating for the month was 4.33. Apparently I rated 3 books 5 stars, but I don't remember. That's not correct. Oh yeah, it is. Okay, just kidding. I'm going crazy. Yeah, I rated 3 books 5 stars, 5 books 4.5 stars. That definitely was my highest percentage of ratings. I rated 2 books 4 stars, 1 book 3.5 stars, and then 1 book 3 stars. So let's just jump right into talking about the actual books that I read. So I am going to kind of break these down into a particular order. So the first category I'm going to talk about is books that I'm not going to share my rating with you because they are going to appear in upcoming secret TBR videos, so I don't want to spoil those, but I will tell you what books that I read this month because it's the March wrap up, you know. And then I'm going to talk about nonfiction books. I feel like these are a little bit different. I'm not going to be ranking these because unless a nonfiction is like truly heinous, and I usually rate it 5 stars because it's usually that person's story and that person's story is valid, you know? So I'm not going to be ranking those. But then after I talk about the nonfiction books, I will get into the rest of the books I read this month, and I will be ranking them. I'll talk about my least favorite first, and then I'll go up to my favorite. All right, we got it. Good. So the first book in the category of books that I am not rating in this video is Winterwood by 𝗕cie 𝗁𝗁. I actually did read this book in my 24-hour reading vlog I posted this month. So if you are interested in hearing more of my thoughts, you can check that video out. I did talk about it a little bit and kind of told you how I felt about it, but it will also be featured in an upcoming TBR video. Basically, this is a YA fantasy book, and it follows our main character who is kind of isolated. She lives alone in the woods. She is thought by the surrounding town to be a witch, and so a lot of the people in the town stay away from her and her family. But then she meets this boy who is from this boys camp that lives across the lake. She finds him like near death in the woods, almost frozen to death because it's winter time. She brings him back to her cabin and kind of like nurses him back to health. They form this connection, and then things kind of spiral from there. She finds out that he might not be who he says he is. There's kind of this murder mystery element going on in this book as well. So there is lots of different elements: magic, romance, murder mystery, a little something for everyone. So that is that book. And the other book that I will not be rating in this video is 𝗧𝗯𝗹𝗄𝗽 what? And the other book that I'm not going to be reading in this video is 𝗧𝗯𝗹𝗄𝗽 by Riley Sager. This is a mystery thriller following our main character who is very much down on her luck, and so she gets this job apartment sitting this apartment in Manhattan. It almost seems too good to be true. She's making like $4,000 a month just to like hang out and live in this luxury apartment, and she finds out that it is a little bit too good to be real because some creepy things start happening. This girl that she befriends, who is also an apartment sitter in this building, ends up going missing, and our main character really thinks something fishy is going on and is determined to figure out what happened to her friend. And she gets a little bit more than even she bargained for. This book is very thrilling. I am very excited to talk about it in my upcoming secret TBR because Riley Sager has been a hit or miss author for me. I really loved Home Before Dark, but Final Girls was pretty awful in my opinion. So it was very fun reading this one to see where I fall, but I'm not going to tell you yet. You'll have to wait and find out for that secret TBR vlog. And then the two nonfiction books I read. The first was Disfigured by Amanda Leduc. I read this for the Nonfiction Baddies book club hosted by my friends Casey and 𝗲𝗡. I really enjoyed this one. In the story, Amanda basically looks at disability through the lens of fairy tales and how disability is depicted within fairy tales, and disabled children are kind of subconsciously told that they are not good enough for the same happy endings that able-bodied people are. And I definitely thought it was an interesting lens to view disability through. I will admit that I never did too much critical thinking about how disability is portrayed in the media and how that results in our like subconscious viewing of disability. I definitely thought that this book was really well written. I enjoyed Amanda's like interspersed ideas throughout and her personal anecdotes and stories. I thought that her story was very interesting, and I liked how she weaved it in with the more critical analysis of media and disability politics and those kinds of things. I definitely thought this was a very valuable read, and I did really enjoy it and recommend it and feel like I got a lot out of it. I did end up rating this one 5 stars. I think there are some criticisms to be made of it, but I don't feel like I am knowledgeable enough to make those criticisms. So overall, I really enjoyed this one and would definitely recommend. The other nonfiction I read was All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a memoir following George M. Johnson's life as they grow up, follows them through childhood and up to being a teenager and a young adult. And really centered in this story is how George M. Johnson navigates being both Black and queer and the struggles they face in their day-to-day life, how they're overcoming them, how they're finding joy in their life and finding who they are. I really found this to be a very beautiful and moving story, and I couldn't do anything but rate it 5 stars. I definitely would recommend everyone read this one as well. It is a very short and accessible, it's technically a YA memoir, so it's definitely like easy to get through, and it's a very good like introductory place to start, especially with like queer theory and intersectionality. It definitely gives you a lot to think about and consider. I really enjoyed it and would definitely recommend this one to everyone as well. Alright, now let's talk about all the fiction books that I will be rating in this video, and again, I will be talking about them from least favorite to most favorite. And my least favorite is like a loose term because my lowest rated book this month was a 3.5 star read, so that's definitely not low for me. That is an above average rating. It means I really enjoyed it, just had a couple problems with it. So my least favorite book that I did read this month was probably Get a Life, Chloe Brown by 𝗬𝗓 Hibbert. This book basically follows our main character, Chloe. Chloe is a very cautious kind of person, but when she gets into a near-death incident, she decides that she hasn't been living her life to the fullest and she really wants to try and make the most of it more often. So she creates this list. It's kind of like a bucket list that she wants to try and achieve so she can like put herself out there and live more life. And one of those goals is to move out of her parents' house, find a new apartment, and so she does so. And once she's there, she meets her like apartment handyman. I never remember what it's called, what his job is called, but anyway, his name is Red and he works there at the apartment complex, and she meets him and he is this artist and he is a very sweet guy, and she kind of enlists his help to help her check off all of her goals on her list, and then they have a little romance along the way. I definitely enjoyed aspects of this one. I thought that the romance was cute. I really did relate to Chloe as a main character. I thought she was very interesting. I'm also kind of like type A, cautious kind of person, so I definitely saw myself in a lot of aspects of her. I also really loved the storyline with the cat on the cover. That was like my favorite part, and I loved her family dynamics with her sisters and everything, and Red was an awesome love interest as well. He was so sweet. He was such a sweetheart, but I just had a little bit of trouble with 𝗬𝗓 Hibbert's writing style. It was very metaphorical. It was like every other sentence was a metaphor comparing something to something else, and I just found it to be a little bit much and a little bit tiring. I also kind of thought that the characters were very much in their heads and they didn't really communicate that much. Like they thought about communicating, but there wasn't a lot of like on-page banter, I didn't think. I don't know if I just missed it or what was going on, but so I didn't love that. I also thought Red infantilized Chloe a little bit and it made me uncomfy. I don't know. And some of the smut scenes were just a little bit, I don't like the vocabulary that was used. Wasn't a fan of all of that. So there's just like a way to write a smut scene that I enjoy, but this book didn't do that, so I didn't love the scenes. And I understand like it was nice of him to take care of her when she was having like episodes of her chronic illness and all that kind of stuff, but he like took it a little too far in my opinion. It made me a little uncomfy. That's this book. Like I said, enjoyed it, but there were definitely some aspects that I just kind of struggled to get on board with. So yeah. Now, all of these books from here on out are like 4 and 4.5 stars, but I did kind of rank them. So next on my list is probably Verona Comics by Jennifer Dugan. I gave this one 4 stars, and I also read this in my vlog where I read gifted books, as well as my vlog, my 24-hour reading vlog. No, I didn't read that in that. Just kidding. Just kidding. Anyway, so this basically follows our main characters, Ridley and Jubilee. Their families own competing comic book shops. Jubilee's family owns this like little mom and pop shop, and Ridley's family owns this like giant conglomeration corporate thing of comic book shops. Because of course they do. But basically they meet and have this little romance, but it turns a little bit darker. This is definitely a darker contemporary, deals with heavy topics. Their relationship kind of becomes codependent because Ridley is struggling with family issues at home as well as anxiety, and he really kind of leans on Jubilee a little bit too much to provide him. She's like becomes his sole source of happiness almost, and it's definitely unhealthy. But what I liked about this book was that it recognized that relationship was unhealthy and codependent, and it like showed how to remedy a situation like that. Like the characters went to therapy and got the help that they needed. So I really appreciated that. I thought it was a little bit strange that this book took that turn because it is kind of marketed as like a cutesy contemporary, but overall I think it handled the topics well, and I ended up really enjoying this one. The next book I want to talk about is Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. This is a male romance that I read on Kindle Unlimited just for the heck of it, and it was a lot of fun. It was basically about these 2 hockey players. They used to be friends when they were younger, but something kind of happened and now they're no longer friends, but then they are competing against each other at this like hockey tournament, and they meet again, and then they again become friends, and then maybe something a little bit more. And this is like just a fluff kind of book. Like there was no purpose for me reading this. It was just purely for enjoyment, and I definitely did enjoy it. It was a little bit cheesy and it was a little bit much in some spots. Also a little bit unrealistic and written from like a straight woman's gaze in that talked about their abs and shit a lot, which I'm not here for that. I'm just here to see men be emotional towards each other, you know. I don't have to explain myself to you, But this book was pretty good. I liked it. It was fun. It was nothing more than that though. And next I want to talk about Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour. This is a quick read following our main character Mila. Mila has grown up her entire life in the foster care system, but when she turns 18 she ages out of it and she ends up getting this job on this farm in California, and she moves there and finds this community of people. It's kind of like a huge foster care farm. Like there's a bunch of kids that living there who are being fostered by the owners of this farm, and Mila goes there to work. She's like the teacher and is supposed to help on the farm and all that kind of stuff, and she is charged with teaching this one little boy, and they kind of have a connection. This is also just in general a book about like trauma and confronting your trauma and learning to accept it as part of you but not to let it define you. This is also a magical realism, so there are ghosty elements. There is also a culty element in this book that I wish was explored a bit more. It was almost a little bit too subtle. Like I think Mila definitely got herself indoctrinated into a cult and she like didn't even realize it. And I wish we had like explored that a little bit more, but overall I really enjoyed this one. It has very lyrical, sparse writing, and I always like just admire that in general. I really connect to that kind of a writing style. I love when authors can convey a really beautiful, important message in very few words. I just think it's very impressive, and Nina LaCour's writing style is just beautiful. I really loved this book. I loved the characters, and I liked the magical realism elements and the ghosts and all of that kind of stuff, so I was a big fan of this one and I definitely would recommend. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Next, I'm going to talk about The Project by Courtney Summers. This is another book with culty elements. This is also a very controversial book, but I was on the side of things that really liked it. I thought it was actually really well done. So basically this follows our main character, Lo. Lo is a journalist and is really kind of struggling at her job to prove herself. She really wants to be a writer, but right now she's just a receptionist. She's really kind of unhappy with that, and so she decides that she's going to take on this project for herself to prove herself. But this project hits a little close to home because she decides she wants to investigate this cult called the Unity Project, and her sister has actually been a member of this cult for like 3 years and she hasn't spoken to her since she joined. And so while Lo's investigating, she kind of gets drawn into things and gets a little bit in over her head, and things in this book definitely take a turn. I really enjoyed this. I thought the writing style was really good. Read this pretty much in one sitting. I thought it was very much like page turning and engaging. There were no characters in this that were like particularly likable, but I felt like all of the characters were very well developed and I totally understood why they made the decisions that they did and why what happened to them. So overall I really thought this one was very well done and I enjoyed it immensely. My only criticisms of it are I think Lo had a mindset shift in this book, and I think the mindset shift made perfect sense, but it happened very suddenly, and I think that deserved more in page time to get from point A to point B. It was believable what happened, but it wasn't developed enough from point A to point B. I think it should have gone a little bit farther into that. I also think that the epilogue was a little bit weak. Like I think this book without the epilogue would have been like perfect. Like I don't understand why that epilogue was in there, other than maybe because people were so upset by the ending of Sadie. But I think Courtney Summers should have just kept doing it, just cut that epilogue off. I would have preferred to not know what happened. I think that would have made this book a little bit stronger. Next, The Weight of the Stars by Kay Ingram. This is a YA like light sci-fi. It takes place on Earth, but it has sci-fi elements, and it follows our main character, Ryan, and Ryan is the kind of person that kind of collects misfits. She kind of befriends people that need friends, takes care of them. She's like a caretaker kind of personality, and this new girl moves to her school. Her name is Alexandria, and so Ryan kind of tries to adopt her as well. She's very standoffish, doesn't really want to interact with anybody, but Ryan is like determined to break down her shell, and eventually she does, and she finds out that Alexandria's mother is actually in space. Alexandria has never really met her before, but she's obsessed with listening outside her window to the radio waves to see if she can pick up messages from her mom. So Ryan ends up like sitting with her, helping her do this, and they really form a connection and eventually a romance, and I really loved the story. I thought it was really cool. I love love the writing style. I really love Kay Angram's writing style in general. I just think she just has a way with words that connects with me a lot. This is also one of those books that has like short chapters, which I love, so it's very easy to get through. And I just thought this was great. I loved the casual diversity in this book. There's so many different types of people represented, and it's just like a thing. It's not some big deal or big issue. It's just like who the people are in the book. I also obviously love that it's gay. I love that it's sapphic, and I really liked the ending. I thought the ending was really good. I don't know if everybody would like the ending, but I thought it was awesome. And yeah, basically I just really liked it. I don't know what else to say. Next is actually Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. This book follows Chloe's sister, Dani, and Dani meets Zafir at work. They're kind of like work friends, but then when there's this fire drill in the building, she gets stuck in this elevator and Zaf comes and rescues her, carries her out. Somebody films them and their like little rescue scene goes viral. Everybody thinks they're dating, and it kind of turns out that this publicity is good for them both. Zaf runs this charity for kids, and it really gives that charity publicity for him. I don't remember what Dani gets out of it, but basically she convinces Zaf to have this like friends with benefits kind of relationship with her because she hasn't had sex with somebody in a while. But Dani is one of those people who is very much like afraid of commitment, and so she doesn't want to catch feelings. She doesn't want him to catch feelings, but they catch feelings, you know? Obviously. I loved this book. I don't know why I liked it so much more than I liked Chloe, but I just thought this one was so good. I connected with Dani a lot more, I think. In this book, Dani is bisexual, which I loved, and again, it was just great representation because it just was who she was, and there weren't any scenes in this book where she had to like come out per se or like justify being bisexual to anyone. Even though she was in a relationship with a man, it was never like, her sexuality was never questioned, and I really just appreciated that on-page representation without it being a thing, without it being a big deal. I loved Dani for that. I just really did. I also didn't struggle as much with the writing in this one, and it might be because I listened to it on audio. I definitely didn't notice as many weird metaphors. I thought Dani and Zaf had a better like communication going, and I also just thought Zaf and Dani had more natural chemistry. I just liked them a little bit better together than I did Chloe and Red. There wasn't any of that weird like infantilizing thing going on in this one. I really enjoyed this book. I liked it a lot. Dani is definitely my favorite brown sister so far, although I have not finished Eve yet, so I can't say that for sure, but I kind of think Dani will always be my favorite. I was shocked how much I liked this one after I felt very like so-so about Chloe, so I'm very grateful for this one. I loved it so much. I thought it was so good. And then my favorite book of the month would probably have to be The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. This book was so freaking cute. I loved it to death. I also read this book in my video where I read gifted books, so thank you again, Paige, for sending me this book. I absolutely loved it. Basically, this follows our main character, Nick, and Nick lives in this world where superheroes are real and they are called extraordinaries, and Nick himself is very much obsessed with these extraordinaries. They're kind of like celebrities in his world, and he is a very popular fan fiction writer for the Extraordinaries, and he writes this like self-insert fanfic that is just like so cringy but just so perfect. And he is obsessed with this one extraordinary in particular, and it's just kind of a running joke among like all of his friends that that Nick likes this extraordinary. But Nick also has this best friend, Seth, who is painfully in love with Nick, and Nick is like the only one that doesn't know. It's just so like painful and funny to watch their interactions and watch all of their friends be like, dude, get it together. But then Nick finds out that he doesn't even know Seth as well as he thought he did, and this book was just perfection. Like, it is so readable. It was hilarious. I laughed out loud quite a bit reading this book, which is just like the best thing ever. And I just really loved Nick and Seth. I thought that they were so cute, and the friend group was great. There was a lot of casual diversity in this book as well, which I really appreciate, and it was just such a fun time. If you want to hear more of my in-depth thoughts, you can definitely check out that blog because I gush over this book for quite a while. But I absolutely loved it. Thought it was so good, and can't wait for the sequel. Very excited. So those were the 12 books I read in March. Definitely let me know down below what the best book you read in March was. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you being here. All relevant links will be in the description down below. Also, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want to keep up with me on the day-to-day. And thank you again so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.